Hello everyone, this is your teacher Anne, and in this video we will learn the in-depth view of value chain analysis. Before anything else, please make sure to have your pen and paper with you so you could take down notes as we move along the discussion. Pause the video and resume when ready. To better understand value chain analysis, we will go over the following topics. First, we will study the value chain concept. And then second, we have the fundamental methodology. Third is we will discuss strategic frameworks of value chain analysis. And then fourth, we will discuss superior performance and competitive advantage. And lastly, we will discuss value chain approach for assessing competitive advantage. Let's examine these concepts one by one. First is value chain concept. The idea of the value chain is based on the process view of companies. The idea of seeing a manufacturing or even a service company as a system that is made up of subsystems, each with inputs, transformation processes, and outputs. So these inputs, transformation processes, and outputs involve the acquisition and consumption of resources such as your money, labor, materials, equipment, buildings, land management, etc. Many companies engage in hundreds, even thousands, of activities in the process of converting inputs to outputs. A company cannot reduce costs and ultimately create value for customers by looking at its activities as a whole, because that would be very complicated, as what I have mentioned, that the companies have hundreds or even thousands of activities. So creating competitive advantage originates from many separate activities that a company performs in, let's say, designing, production, marketing, delivering, and supporting its products. Each of these activities can contribute to improve a company's cost position and customer value. So, for example, a superior product design, a highly efficient assembly process, procurement of high quality inputs, a responsive order entry system, and a low cost products distribution system. All of these may enable a company to improve its cost position and also customer value. Examining all the activities that a company performs and how they interact is necessary for improving the cost position and customer value. So the value chain is a very systematic way for doing such. Let's look at the value chain of Nike. So this is the value chain of Nike Incorporated. Here on the boxes highlighted in green, we have steps 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then these are all for raw material production. And this group, activities 6, 7, and 8, these are all under material manufacturing. And then the pink group, which consists of activities 9 and 10. These are for material finishing. And then we have this blue group, consists of activities 11 and 12. These are for finished goods manufacturing. Then we have this teal group, which consists of activities 13 and 14. These activities pertain to the logistics. And then we have this group, which consists of activities 15 and 16. These are for retail group. And then lastly, we have for consumer use. So, and then we have here end of life cycle. So for the first activity, because this is again the value chain of Nike, this is the breakdown of all the activities that the company performs. So we start with number one, headquarters, facilities, and business travel here, enclosed in orange. And then the second activity is cattle rearing. Then we proceed to the third activity, which is recycling and processing. Fourth activity is for fossil fuel extraction and refining. Fifth activity will be cotton grooming. And then sixth activity is yarn spinning, followed by number seven, which is textile knitting and weaving. Then we proceed to number eight, which is leather tanning. After which we proceed to activity number nine. This is for textile finishing, and then move on to activity number 10, which is textile dyeing. Then proceed to activity 11, footwear manufacturing. Then move on to activity number 12. This is for apparel and equipment manufacturing. Then forward this for activity 13, which is for transportation. And then 14 is distribution center. So the products will be distributed to the several distribution centers. And then 15 will be for non Nike retail. And then 16 for Nike retail. So these are our retailers. This is where the customers shop. Then 17, we have washing and drying. Okay. And because this is for when the customers are already using the Nike products. And then lastly will be the end of life, which is pertaining to the activity of landfill, incineration, or reuse. So, as what we can see in this example, the value chain describes the activities within and around a company and then relates these activities to an analysis of the competitive strength of the company. Therefore, it considers a systematic way to make a company able to evaluate which activity can add value to the customers and with respect to the products or services that a company provides. Thus, this idea was built upon the insight that a company is more than the random compilation of machinery, equipment, people, and money. Only if these things are arranged into systems and systematic activities that it will become possible to produce something for which customers are willing to pay a price. In many industries, it is rather unusual that a single company performs all activities from product design, production of components, and final assembly up to the delivery to the final user by itself. Most often, or more often than not, a company is an element of a value system. Hence, Michael Porter explained that a company's value chain is embedded in a broader value system that provides inputs into the company and then helps transfer the outputs to the ultimate consumer. So it's like going back to that famous saying that no man is an island. So the figure here, shown in your screen, the figure presented here illustrates the value system for an industry. So as shown here, suppliers have value chains that create and deliver the purchased inputs into a company's own chain or value chain. Suppliers not only deliver a product but also can influence the costs and performance within the company by many ways. Example, through quality control, meeting delivery dates, and the supplier's prices as well. In addition, many products pass through distribution channels on their way to the customer. The value chains of these channels perform additional activities that affect the customer as well as influence the company's own activities. The linkages between a company and its suppliers and customers should be managed so that all parties will benefit from it. Gaining and sustaining competitive advantage depends not only on the understanding of a company's own value chain activities and the linkages between these activities, but also on recognizing and managing the relationships between the company and the value chains of its suppliers and its customers. So at this point, it must be clear in our minds that the value chain is not the same as value system. So both the value system and the value chain are important tools for understanding how a company can position itself against its competitors. But again, these two concepts are not the same. So let's distinguish one from the other. The value chain represents the interrelated value creating activities inside the company. These activities affect each other and cannot be treated in isolation. The idea in the value chain was to capture the fact that a company does a series of functions or activities. Analyzing how these functions or activities are done relatively to their competitors can provide useful insights to the business. On the other hand, when we speak of value system, value system is the set of interdependent value chains all the way from the suppliers of raw materials up to the end user or the final consumers. So, to gain competitive advantage, a company has to realize that the costs and benefits, that is, the values associated with the products, must be examined from the final consumer's point of view. So, for a product to be competitive, it must pass through the whole value system efficiently. Having learned this, let's now discuss the fundamental methodology of value chain analysis for cost management. So, as discussed, every business may be viewed as a chain of activities. It is obvious that the behavior of a company's costs and its cost position develop as a result of the value activities that the company performs in competing within its industry. Therefore, effective cost management requires considering or examining costs within the value activities carefully and in detail, and not the cost of the company as a whole. So you need to look at the individual activities. So here are the principal stages of value chain analysis for strategic cost management. First stage is to identify the value chain activities and disaggregate the firm into separate activities. So in the value chain analysis for strategic cost management, activities should be separated if they represent a significant or rapidly growing percentage of total costs. On the other hand, if activities are so small and having only stagnant percentage of costs, a company can actually group them together into broader categories. A company can also separate value chain activities if they have different cost drivers. A company can also aggregate or disaggregate a particular activity according to the behavior of competitors. This means that significant activities should be treated separately when competitor performs them in a different way. Second stage is to establish the relative importance of different activities in the total cost of the product. So, after identifying its value chain and which activities will be aggregated or disaggregated, a company must then trace the costs to activities. Identification of activities in the value chain and their costs allows management to decide on the most cost beneficial manner in employing the activities. Thus, the cost system should trace costs to separate value activities in order to enable the company to manage its activities better than its competitors. Information on cost allocation basis, and relationships of value chain costs and the degree of cost tracing are essential to manage value chain activities successfully. The adoption of ABC or activity based costing has made such cost data more available. Third stage is to compare costs by activity. So, to establish which activities the company performs relatively efficiently and which activities do not, a company should benchmark unit costs for each activity against those of its competitors. So, a company should benchmark the costs of key activities to understand the best practices involved in performing such activity and to see to it if costs are in line with other companies. A company can use information from published reports, trade groups, industry analysts, customers, and suppliers as the basis for this analysis. Comparing a company's cost activity by activity against those of rivals may result in identifying areas of cost advantage or cost disadvantage, or learning which internal activities are a source of the cost advantage or disadvantage. The fourth stage is to identify cost drivers. For each activity, what factors determine the level of cost relative to other firms? The factors that influence the costs of the activities in the value chain and are therefore major strategic choices are what we call or refer to as cost drivers. The ABC or activity based costing can be a very helpful tool in identifying the cost drivers of the operating costs of companies. For some activities, cost drivers are obvious and is evident simply from the nature of activity and composition of costs. On the other hand, for capital intensive activities, the principal factors are likely to be capital equipment costs and production volume. For labor intensive activities, the issues and what we can use as cost drivers could be wage rates or salary rates, speed of work, and defect rates. We have discussed this also in the previous recorded discussion, particularly on the cost driver analysis topic. The fifth stage is to identify linkages and interrelationships in the value chain. Although competitive advantage arises from one or more sub activities within the primary and support activities comprising the value chain of the company itself, it is important not to think of the value chain merely as a set of independent activities. Rather, it is a system of interdependent activities. Linkages in the value chain, which are relationships between the activities, are very important. In the value chain, costs are associated with value creating activities. Thus, by reducing the costs in the various activities of the value chain, the company may be able to reduce costs effectively. However, consideration must also be given to the linkages between these activities. The cost of performing one activity will often be influenced by the way in which other activities are performed. In addition, behavior in one part of the company can affect the costs and performance of other business units and functions, and this quite frequently involves trade off decisions. Thus, the cost of activities should not be reduced again independently, but rather they should be optimized together. This way, it is possible to achieve an overall cost reduction throughout the whole value chain, resulting in a competitive advantage. So, since we are talking about here of linkages, the four areas for improving the company's cost position and customer value are um, with respect to these four linkages. First, linkages within the value chain of a business unit. Then, second, we have linkages across business units, value chains within the company. Third is linkages with suppliers. And lastly, linkages with customers. Then, the sixth and final stage is to identify opportunities for reducing costs and or improving value. Opportunities to reduce costs are derived from many different sources within the value chain. Gaining and sustaining cost advantage may originate from one activity or many activities within the company, and controlling cost drivers and redefining the value chain can play a role in creating cost advantage. A company should exploit all the opportunities available for reducing costs in activities that do not influence the value to customer. Thus, for each value activity, a company should try to reduce costs in this activity and keep the value constant or even increase value. So, again, these are all the principal stages with respect to the fundamental methodology of value chain analysis in strategic cost management. Again, first, we have to identify the value chain activities and disaggregate the firm into separate activities. And then, second, we have to establish the relative importance of different activities in the total cost of the product. Third is to compare costs by activity. Fourth is to identify cost drivers. And then the fifth stage is to identify linkages and interrelationships in the value chain. And last stage will be to identify opportunities for reducing costs and or improving value. Let's now discuss and move on to the strategic frameworks for value chain analysis. Value chain analysis requires internal information for the internal value chain and external information for the entire industry value chain. The value chain analysis requires strategic framework for organizing varied information. So the following are the three generally accepted strategic framework for value chain analysis. You have the industry structure analysis, core competencies analysis, and segmentation analysis. So, first is the industry structure analysis. An industry might not yield very high profits just because the industry is large or growing. The five forces suggested by Porters play a very important role in determining profit potential of the firms within a specific industry. Michael Porter developed a five factors model as a way to organize information about an industry structure to evaluate its potential attractiveness. So here you can see in your screen the Porter's five forces analysis. So we have the bargaining power of buyers. We also have bargaining power of suppliers. You have threat of substitute products or services. We also have threat of new entrants. And lastly, we have the rivalry among existing competitors. So, what do we mean by this? Let's start off first with bargaining power of buyers. The bargaining power of buyers generally determines the ability of buyer to push the price down. This happens when the buyers are concentrated or when the volume purchased by buyers is very high. In other words, when the bargaining power of the buyers is high, they would be in a position to dictate the terms to us, to our business. A buyer also has higher bargaining power if the cost of switching suppliers is very low. So, what does this mean? This means that a higher bargaining power results in lower profitability. Large companies have a high bargaining power when they buy from small suppliers. And the second force is we have the bargaining power of suppliers. The bargaining power of supplier is relatively higher when the input is very important to the buying firm or when there are very few suppliers of that particular input. The suppliers could also dictate the terms if the input supplied is not replaceable or when an alternative input is not available. Example: Microsoft dominates the operating system business of computers and laptops and can dictate terms to its buyers because buyers here do not have multiple options to choose from. The profitability of companies can shrink if the suppliers have a higher bargaining power. And third, we have threat of substitute products or services. When multiple and close substitutes are available in the market for a particular product, customers are likely to switch suppliers easily. A firm in such a case must resort to competitive pricing to retain its customers. On the contrary, when few substitutes exist for a product or service, customers are willing to pay a potentially high price. If close substitutes for a product exist, then there is a limit to what price customers are willing to pay. The problem becomes severe if substitutes are available at a much cheaper price. A company then should strive to build its brand and customer loyalty to thwart the threat of substitutes. Substitutes could be from within the industry or from a different industry. So, example, the paper industry faces threats from the ebook market. When more people switch to public transport or public transportation, the demand for vehicles comes down. And fourth, we have threat of new entrants. The threat of new entrants largely depends on the barrier to entry and perceived profitability in an industry. If a specific industry is profitable and barriers to entry are very low, new companies could enter the industry, leading to excess suppliers and then ultimately reduced prices. Some examples of barriers to entry are intensive capital requirement because there are businesses that you cannot enter into if you cannot raise a specific amount of capital. Then, for another example of barriers to entry is sophisticated technology, legal factors, limited access to raw materials and labor, etc. Industries which require huge amount of capital or sophisticated technical know-how might not have a high threat of new firms entering into the industry because it would be very difficult for a proprietor to enter into such business. The airline industry is a case where very new firms enter the business because of the capital requirements. Another barrier to entry could be legislation, which restricts newer firms to start the business. Certain industries, for example, medicines, are largely driven by patents, and new firms might find it difficult to enter the industry. An industry where threat of new entrants is low is more profitable than an industry where new entrants can easily enter the industry. Then last one, we have rivalry among competitors, or this refers to the intensity of the competition. Some markets are more competitive than others. In highly competitive industries, firms resort to cutthroat competition to win more customers. The competitive rivalry is higher when an industry has high number of firms and is lower when there are few large players dominating the market. Since these five forces are ever changing, Porter's framework needs to be employed as a dynamic analytical tool. So we should not view this as a very fixed tool, but rather we should view this as a dynamic analytical tool. This is because competition is a dynamic process. Equilibrium is never reached, and industry structures are constantly being reformed. The five forces analysis helps a firm to better understand the industry value chain and its competitive environment. The second part of the framework is the core competencies analysis. Core competency is a distinctive or unique skill or technological know how that creates distinctive customer value. The core competency of Google is its capability to deliver excellent search results, which could not be imitated by its competitors. The core competencies are a function of the collective skill set of people within your organization, also organization structure resources, and technical know how. A core competency is the primary source of an organization's competitive advantage. The competitive advantage could result from either cost leadership or product differentiation. We will discuss these two concepts later. There are three tests that are very useful for identifying our core competence. First, we must test how much access you have to a wide variety of markets. Then, what are your end product benefits? Is your product difficult for competitors to imitate? The loss of core competencies will be a disaster for firms. Example, Nokia. Nokia was a leader in the feature phone segment till smartphones were introduced. The changing dynamics of industry meant that Nokia lost the top position in the mobile phone industry and led to the sale of the business to Microsoft. It is thus important that the firms continuously evolve their core competencies and remain relevant in the ever changing business environment. The last part of the strategic framework is segmentation analysis. A single industry might be a collection of different market segments. Motor vehicle industry, for example, can be seen as a composite of tire, glass, battery, metals, etc. Not all firms in an industry participate in all segments. The structural characteristics of different industry segments need to be examined. So, this analysis, segmentation analysis, will reveal the competitive advantages or disadvantages of different segments. A firm may use this information to decide to exit the segment or to enter a segment or to reconfigure one or more segments or embark on cost reduction or differentiation programs. So, as you can see in your screen, there are five steps in the performance of segmentation analysis. The first step is to identify segmentation variables and categories. An industry might be divided into multiple segments depending upon the nature and complexity of the industry. The segmentation could be based on the nature of products or geographies or customers. Second step is to construct a segmentation matrix. So after the segments are identified, a segmentation matrix can be created. Usually, this is based on the nature of the products and geographies. So, for example, all segments that are found within the Visayas area will be treated as one. Another way could be to create a matrix using products and distribution channel. So, when we say distribution channel, it could be wholesale, retail, or direct selling. The third step is to analyze the segment attractiveness. So the segmentation matrix could be used to evaluate profitability and performance of each of the segments. The interrelationship between various segments, let's say distribution channels or similar products, must also be considered while analyzing segmental attractiveness. The fourth step is to identify key success factors for each segment. Each segment identified must be assessed with a relevant measure of performance. It could be quality of products or quality of the service, timeliness of delivery of the products, etc. A single performance measure across all segments is not advisable. A measure which suits the service segment will not suit the manufacturing segment, right? So there is no, this is not a one size fits all. You need to make sure that um, your performance measure must be able to really measure that particular segment and not just choose a very general performance measurement. Then the last step will be to analyze attractiveness of broad versus narrow segment scope. The company must identify whether it wants to be in a broad segment or a narrow one. Narrower segments could be very risky for business as a single segment could be vulnerable to the competition. Multiple segments, on the other hand, help a company to spread costs across the various segments. The company might also be in a position to use the competency of one segment in other segments. Some firms might abandon certain segments because of lack of profitability. The competitive advantage of each segment may be identified in terms of low cost and or differentiation. The fourth topic that we will discuss today is superior performance and competitive advantage. The ultimate objective for a profit company is to achieve superior performance in comparison to their competitors. A company which attains superior performance gets a definitive competitive advantage. So, in order to survive and prosper in an industry, the firms must meet two criteria. First, they must supply what customers want to buy. And second, they must survive competition. A firm's overall competitive advantage derives from the difference between the value it offers to customers and its cost of creating that customer value. In order to attain superior performance and attain competitive advantage, a firm must have distinctive competencies. So, distinctive competencies can take any of the following two forms. Again, we have the cost leadership and product differentiation. So, let's examine this one by one. We have first cost leadership, or also referred to as low cost advantage. A firm enjoys a relative cost advantage if its total costs are lower than those of its competitors. This cost advantage or lower cost advantage enables a company to do one of the following. It can either charge a lower price than its competitors for its product or services in order to gain market share and still maintain current profitability, or second, it can match with the price of competing products or services and increase its profitability. A company must choose a strategy in which it can lower its cost and thereby gain a competitive advantage. Many sources of cost advantage exist. Example, access to low cost raw materials, innovative process technology, low cost access to distribution channels or customers, and superior operating management. A company might also gain a relative cost advantage by exploiting economies of scale in some markets. However, a disadvantage of this strategy is that competitors might also find a way to lower their costs as well. Therefore, a company which pursues a cost leadership strategy must continuously improve its cost structure. Another risk associated with cost leadership strategy is that managers might try to lower costs by compromising the quality of products. So, what are the possible ways in order to achieve low cost advantage? Value chain analysis can actually identify the points at which low cost advantage can be achieved through any of the following: reduce costs by copying rather than creating designs. But this must be done in such a way as not to infringe any intellectual properties of other companies. Okay. And then by using cheaper materials and other cheaper resources, but again, make sure not to compromise quality, reducing labor costs and increasing labor productivity, attaining economies of scale by high volume sales, the use of high volume purchasing to get discounts for bulk purchase, locating in areas where cost advantage exists or government support is possible, and through gaining learning and experience curve benefits. Another way to obtain competitive advantage, aside from cost leadership, is through product differentiation or through differentiation advantage. It occurs when customers perceive that a business unit's product offering is of higher quality, or it involves fewer risks, or it outperforms the products offered by competitors. So, in other words, customers perceive the product or service offered by a business to be superior. For example, differentiation may include a firm's ability to deliver goods and services in a timely manner, to produce better quality, to offer the customer a wider range of goods and services, and other factors that provide unique customer value. A differentiation advantage can be achieved by adopting the following techniques. First, we have superior quality. Customers are offered a better quality product in the similar price range. The quality of product or service offering is such that the company becomes a preferred choice of its customers. Another technique could be superior innovation. The company continuously offers innovative products ahead of its competition. Another technique that you can also use is superior customer responsiveness. The company produces products or provides services which are aligned with customers' expectation. The company also focuses on overall customer service and works towards parameters like reducing waiting time, on time delivery, etc. So companies like Apple, no, Apple charge premium prices from its customers because customers perceive Apple's products to be different from others. Differentiation advantage. Value chain analysis can identify points at which advantage can be achieved by any of the following: producing products which are superior to competitors by virtue of design, know how, performance, etc. Offering superior after sales service by outstanding distribution, expanding the product range, superior packaging of the product, and making brand strength. The last topic covered in this video is the value chain approach for assessing competitive advantage. The value chain model can be used by business to assess the competitive advantage. Companies must not only focus on the end product or end service, but also on the process or activities involved in the creation of these products or services. The value chain approach can be used to better understand the competitive advantage in the following areas. So we have the internal cost analysis, internal differentiation analysis, and the vertical linkage analysis. First one is internal cost analysis. The steps that are generally used to carry out an internal cost analysis are already discussed in the fundamental methodology under topic 2 in this video. So let's proceed to the second one, internal differentiation analysis. Companies can also use the value chain analysis to create and offer superior differentiation to the customers. The focus is on improving the value perceived by customers on the company's products and service offering. The firms must identify and analyze the value creating process and carry out a differentiation analysis. How? So first, we have to identify the customer's value creating processes. Second is to evaluate differentiation strategies for enhancing customer value. And third is to determine the best sustainable differentiation strategies. So for the first one, first again is to identify the customer's value creating processes. The company must identify various activities in its value chain which are undertaken to deliver products or services to its customers. Differentiation comes from the way various activities are performed and the way in which value chain is structured. Second is to evaluate differentiation strategies for enhancing customer value. The company seeks to evaluate various strategies which could enhance the customer value. The strategies which a company can implement to enhance the customer value are first to obtain superior features in product, such as when it comes to your premium cars or phones, etc. Then you can also use effective marketing and distribution channels. You can also use excellent customer service. For example, if you are into the business of hotels, then you can make sure that the cleanliness of your hotel is 5 star. No, or for example, if you have a repairs and maintenance business, so the timeliness of the repairs at a very effective cost. You can also aim for having a superior brand image, like what we have for Apple and Google. Or you can also offer better quality products at competitive prices. And the last is to determine the best sustainable differentiation strategies. The activities which could enhance differentiation must be identified. A company must identify those strategies which could create sustainable product or service differentiation. The selection of strategy must be according to, of course, the availability of your own resources. Then the last analysis is vertical linkage analysis. A company generates competitive advantage not only through linkages of the internal process within the firm, but also through linkages between a firm's value chain and that of a suppliers or users or consumers. A vertical linkage analysis includes all upstream and downstream activities throughout the industry. So when we say upstream, towards your suppliers, and then downstream is going to your distribution channels and then ultimately to your customers. The analysis encompasses activities beginning at the source of raw materials, which are our suppliers, and ending at the final delivery of products to the customers. A company must have an understanding of not only its internal value chain, but also of the industry value chain. So this topic has actually been discussed under topic number one in this video, particularly when we learn the concept of value system as compared to the concept of value chain. So at this point, you are all able to have a deeper understanding of value chain analysis, and how important this is to an organization. Now, we also have to relate this, the value chain concept, to the concept of supply chain management. So, this topic, supply chain management, I already covered this in another video entitled The Conceptual Framework of Performance Management Part 2. Please do listen to it. Okay. So, thanks for listening. I hope you all learned something valuable today. Till our next lesson. Bye.